Hello, hello, everybody. This is Angel Arts, and welcome to yet another Let's Interview, one of the finalists of the upcoming tabletop campaign, the Wizarding World of Harry Potter tabletop campaign. I am here with AJ,
Hey.
and AJ put in a very special request for his guest interviewer. AJ decided to select Roma.
Hi, everyone.
You may have remembered Roma in such campaigns like Pokemon Spectrum, where she played Molly, in addition to Ew, the beloved hug-filled Grimer.
Of
Um,
course.
I honestly am not really sure which one was my favorite character because they both were amazing. Although I know a lot of people have a soft spot for Ew because, why not?
I was hoping to get a ooh hug. That's why I was going with Roma. So
I expect you, Roma, by the end of this to have some sort of nickname for AJ that you would refer to AJ. So,
Okay. We'll
but
see how
anyway,
this goes.
all right. So I am just going to shut up now and let Roma take over from here.
All right. So, AJ, I have a couple questions for you. First of all, what is it about tabletop that you are passionate about or interested in?
tabletop kind of brings together two of my favorite things. One being playing games, and two being storytelling. So I don't know, probably for about 15 years now, ever since I kind of first explored D&D and bought some books, I've just been intrigued at the idea of kind of that choose your own adventure game that's really story driven. And those are just two things that I like to do a lot, even if it's separate, just playing games or writing stories.
That's also why I got into into tabletop. So,
Cool.
um, and what is it about Harry Potter that you are passionate about or interested in?
Uh-huh. Um, I think with when comes to stories, I prefer stories based in fantasy. I always have enjoyed just kind of that like unknown. There's so many. It's not as limited as like real life. You can be very imaginative, and your own imagination is kind of your limit. So I've always kind of erred on the side of picking fantasy or sci-fi.
Hmm.
And my aunt is a librarian, and whenever I was in whatever year it came out, I think I was middle school. She's like, "Oh, I think you're gonna like these books," and I think it was just the first three that were out, and I finished them like as fast as I could, and then from the fourth one on, it was just that like waiting till midnight releases and just diving into the story. So I think mainly because it's fantasy, but I think J.K. Rowling just does an awesome job with her characters and just causing you to either love or hate them, which is what I think makes a good character.
Do you have a favorite spell from Harry Potter?
We were actually talking about this in chat, and I said probably Accio because, it's the spell for if you're being lazy, just like summon something over. So I feel like it would be the most practical.
Hmm.
Aside from that, I think personally, I would like any spells that deal with like changing something. So probably the transfiguration spells, because I just think that field is cool. It's not necessarily what Albion's into, but personally, I think the transfiguration spells are just neat that you can completely change something into something else.
I would be a fan of like Accio popcorn, Accio
Right?
soda, something like
Yes. I was gonna say, even if it's just like 5 feet away, it's like I don't want to move.
And so you've been playing tabletop for quite a while. You're probably going to be more experienced than some of the other players. So, as a more experienced player, how would you help guide the less experienced players?
hmm Well, first of all, I don't want to. I've only actually played for about a year, so I don't know if that is a lot of experience or not. But I've never been a player, is the thing. I've only DM'd or GM'd, whatever you want to call it. I've had the books and like explored the idea of it, but I never could find groups. So over the past year, I have got to DM a Pokemon game, which is how I found Spectrum. Um,
Hmm.
so I feel like there might be some aspects that I could help with, but then as a new player, I feel like I'm coming in very nervous to kind of be in the other side, but very excited.
Hmm.
So I guess to answer it though, because I would want to help people in the ways that I could.
Hmm.
Um, I think I would just let them know not to get too caught up in things. Like the one thing I've learned from DMing is that these books and these systems are very, very intricate and intense, and it's like pages upon pages. And I think I was reading the Dungeons and Dragons like GM tips, and the first thing it said is like, don't ruin the flow of a session trying to find something like to see if you add the +2 or the +3. Like don't argue about stuff like that. So I'd say just like relax, don't get too stressed about the mechanics of it, and just have fun with it.
So AJ, I consider you, and I don't know if you're just hiding it, but I consider you to be pretty a pretty confident person, and you strike me as someone who's very charismatic and might be one of the more outgoing people around the table compared to some of the other auditioners. How do you see yourself being able to help out some of the quieter or shyer people around the table?
Mm-hmm. I think that like even just in life, like while my brain might be going a lot, I don't always talk a lot. I do sometimes have the inner confidence, but I give others a chance. I like to sit back so that they don't lose opportunities. So if I may see an opportunity sometimes, I may wait and see if someone else takes it before I kind of jump on it. So I think maybe that might help people to kind of come out a little bit, because I think if the people that are dominant and more confident just take over and like take every opportunity, then they don't allow the others to kind of flourish. So just giving them those opportunities. But I think it's honestly, from what I saw in Spectrum, like I just felt like they created a family, and maybe that was just from what I saw, but I feel like that's going to be an important part too, is connecting with the people outside of the game. And just encouraging them, even if it's not in the session, like afterwards, like, oh, wow, like that was awesome when you did this, or I don't know, just building that friendship. I think that's what's going to drive any good group.
It's important to remember that you're all writing a story together.
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
All right. So what about possible difficulties you might have? What kind of difficulties, or this is kind of the what is your biggest weakness?
Yeah.
question.
Part of it, yeah.
So I've thought about this, and I'm pulling this kind of from my writing days when I used to like role play via writing, back and forth, like posting. And I think the hardest thing for me was always staying true to my character and not me. And I think that back then when I was writing those things, like 18, 19 years old, I probably didn't do very well at that. I think I wrote more as me, and almost all of my characters were just like subtle variations of me. And I don't think that's a bad thing, but I think that you truly don't want to lose the concept of your character, because that's what makes them unique. So I think I worry most that like, am I going to just rush into something doing what I would do or doing what my character would do? So that's something I'm going to try to be very aware of as I go.
And kind of a more fun question, hopefully.
Mm-hmm.
Which Harry Potter character would your character like, or be, let's say, good friends with or best friends with? And on the other hand, who would they dislike?
Okay. And here's a good chance for me to think like my character and not me.
There you go.
I think he would like Molly Weasley. I haven't fully fleshed out who his mother was or like her personality. But at first thought, like I feel like she'd probably remind me a lot of Molly Weasley. And because he, misses his mom who has passed, I'm not sure if you remember that from the edition, but I think that he would have a special interest or liking to Molly Weasley. She's very protective, and I think he also is going to be the type of person that is very protective of his relationships. So I think that's someone that he would like or get along with very well. So opposed to that, I think the character from Harry Potter that Albion would not get along with or not like very much. The first person that comes to my head is Draco Malfoy, but he's so easy to hate. So I'm going to go a step further than that, because, and I think it's weird that I'm relating it now to his father, but I think Lucius Malfoy, someone who just is in the very, like, they care about appearances and the public eye and that whole, like, he's not necessarily a political person, like Albion's father would be, but it's just that caring so much about what other people think of you and that persona that you put off. And I think the whole Malfoy family just kind of reminds me of that. Even Narcissa, her name comes from, the word narcissist. So I think that's a family he would easily hate, not just because they're into the dark arts, but just because of their like persona and kind of what they represent.
So, AJ, one of the things I really loved about your character concept is how flexible it is in terms of you being very open to have him be in any school, really. So one of the things that I am looking for in a player is someone who is able to help me flesh out a lot of the holes in the lore,
Mm-hmm.
especially when it comes to the different schools and the countries that they are located in. So my question is, if you could pick one of the other schools, one of the other international schools that's not Ilvermorny and
Mm-hmm.
not Hogwarts, and tell me what you envision um, to be what that school would be like, or what the country or culture of that country in the wizarding world would be like that's different from Hogwarts or in America.
Mm-hmm. Um, so one thing I thought about, and I had ranked them. I think Wagadu was my first, Castle Brusho third, and Mahatakoro or second, and then Mahutakoro third. So it's like looking at Wagadu, for example. One thing I was toying with was the idea of almost like I know how Hogwarts has their houses, but I was thinking like a brotherhood or like a small pact of people, and kind of like a small family within your house instead of like I feel like Hogwarts is a bigger house. So I was thinking like even like what's a fraternity of sorts. So something like that I was thinking to pull in, and I think I put some ideas about that into the chat. As far as like the cultural thing, that was a challenge because they're not areas I know a lot about. So I did some brief research, but then I thought to myself, like, I didn't want to get too deep into it and like follow all these rabbit trails. And I figured if I were to get chosen and get one of them, I definitely want to like research the culture more and learn about it. Even to the point where, you know, I know that you've said you want to explore more wizards and witches of color. So I definitely want some of my NPCs to kind of represent that culture. And I've even thought more about it in the past few days about having my character even be from that culture if possible. I'm not opposed to it. I think I just went with, you know, Caucasian male because that's what I'm familiar with and comfortable with, but I'm not afraid to kind of push my boundaries a little bit. I can't promise I would know the most about it, but I mean, that's the fun of learning and kind of growing as you go. So,
Yeah. Yeah, like I definitely, for this campaign, I definitely want to try my hardest for all of us to try to be as accurate as possible.
mm-hmm.
And not just jump into like stereotypes and things like that. So
Right.
definitely am interested in everyone who ends up in the final roster to do their homework and do their research and find out things so that we're not like offending anyone.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I have a friend who she has an African background, and I even like almost went as far as to like message her and ask her for some like just tips or ideas. But I held off on that. But I don't
Yeah.
know. It's an area that is kind of nervous. Like I don't know if I could do it, but I'd be up for the challenge.
So we're going to move on to the role playing part now. So Albion is sitting in his, let's say, his dorm room or his common room or whatever, assuming that the other schools have similar
Right.
setup. For now, we'll say that they do. So you're sitting in your common room. You're getting ready to go to your herbology class, and you suddenly hear a voice from the fireplace. And you recognize this voice as Alexander's voice. So he says, Albion, Albion, son, can you hear me?
He'd ignore it a little bit at first and just kind of continue packing his bag. Maybe even like purposely turn his back a little bit to the fire.
Now, Albion, I know you're there. Come on, speak to your father.
Dad, I'm getting ready to go to herbology, and I don't really have time to argue right now. What do you need?
You're going to play with your plants. Gonna go dig in the dirt again like you like to do.
Again, what do you need?
Is a father not allowed to call upon his son just to check how he's doing?
Well, when it seems like the only time you call upon me is to ask me something about where I'm going or wondering what I'm doing and checking in on me, it just kind of gets annoying after a while.
Come on, Albion. It's just me trying to take care of my son and worrying about my son. Am I not allowed to do that?
Boy, you don't always seem to worry about me other times, just when you need something.
Oh, that was one time. Come on. I needed something from your professor. Am I not
Mm-hmm.
allowed to call on favors from my son also?
Yeah, but your favors always seem to come with strings.
Let's not talk about that, Albion. Let's not talk about that. I just wanted to know, how were the results of your exams last week? I don't believe I've heard about them yet.
Well, don't worry. Nobody's going to be writing any articles about how your son is failing his classes.
That's not what I was concerned about. I'm just worried about your well-being.
Mm-hmm. Dad, I'm doing fine in my classes. You know that I study, I take my time, I do what I need to do. So I feel like there's an ulterior motive to this visit.
Very well, Albion. I can see you're a little irritated. I can see you're getting ready to go play with your, I mean, study your plants. But I was a little bit curious, son. Have you been, you know, seeing anyone?
Dad, I've told you, it is none of your business if I'm seeing anyone or not.
But surely the girls must be fawning over you.
I think at this point he would kind of start to like hike his bag up over his shoulder and start to walk away a little bit. Not wanting to totally disrespect his father, but enough to kind of give the hint that he doesn't really want to talk about this much further.
Okay. As you're walking away, Alexander will say, "Oh, I see. You're too busy to think about girls. Well, I can certainly understand that. But just keep in mind, studying is important, but you must worry about your social connections too."
Dad, I've got friends. I'm getting decent grades, decent marks in all my classes. I'm doing nothing to put a bad light on you, so why don't you just let me live my life?
Very well. We will continue this conversation later. And he kind of waves you away and disappears.
I think at that point he would kind of, seeing his dad go, he would kind of relax a little and untense. And I think he'd just pause for a minute, kind of replaying it in his head, and then maybe start heading out the door towards herbology.
Okay. So you go to your herbology class. There's potted plants everywhere. Some students are mingling around. The teacher is not there yet. You go in. Maybe you start unpacking your bag or something, and you notice something strange happening to some of the plants. Some of the plants are being knocked over by something that you don't see.
Okay. Sorry, you said the teacher's not there. There's other students though.
There's other students.
Okay. Is it like a loud, obvious thing that other people are seeing, or is it just something that he's noticing like subtly?
For now, it's just subtle.
Okay. I think I assume maybe a friend or a classmate beside him, he might like nudge someone and like kind of like cock his head to the side. Hey, look, do you see anything over there?
Your friend looks over and says, "Oh, those were standing up a second ago, weren't they?"
Right? Like, am I missing something?
I don't know. Should we go check?
So like how far, like, is this on the edge of the room? Is it close by?
Let's say it's on the edge of the room.
Okay, so he would probably turn back to his friend, be like, well, class is going to be starting soon, and we don't want to lose any points or get in trouble, whatever it is at their school, for being out of our seats. So I don't know. Do you think it's some sort of creature?
As you're wondering this, a whole row of plants gets knocked over, and whatever has been knocking them over materializes, and you recognize this as a poltergeist.
Okay.
There's a poltergeist, and he's just gleefully giggling, knocking things off the shelves. There's dirt, there's plants, there's everything flying around.
Would this poltergeist be one that Albion recognizes, or just a general poltergeist?
I'll say you recognize him. He's kind of a known troublemaker.
Okay. Does he have a name? that we're going to refer to him as, or her?
Yeah, his name is Robert.
Robert.
Yes, Robert.
Okay, so, and do we know that Robert is generally harmless for the most part?
He doesn't. He's a very mischievous poltergeist. He has never harmed anyone too badly, but his mischief can cause trouble.
Okay.
Can cause injury.
I think at that point, then, knowing he's just there to mostly cause trouble and not really harm anyone, Al would probably stand up and get his wand out and just kind of point it at him, somewhat threateningly, but just enough to kind of give him the hint and maybe say something like, "Robert, we've had enough of your tricks. Be gone."
Robert gives you a wide grin, and he says, "Do you think that wooden stick scares me?"
Well, when you see what I can do with it, it might. And he kind of cocks his head to the side, hoping that the poltergeist doesn't kind of call his bluff. I think Albion's probably unsure if, there's any spells he can recall that might be able to do anything to a poltergeist.
Mm-hmm. So Robert says, "Okay, let's see how you stop me from doing this." And he reaches over and he grabs onto something. You recognize the thing that he's grabbing as young mandrakes.
Oh no.
And you know what will happen if he pulls those out.
So I think at this point, and I'm not sure what spells Albion would or wouldn't know, but he would probably at that point, rather than focusing on the poltergeist, try to think quick about a spell that could be used to kind of preserve or save the mandrakes from being uprooted. And off the top of my head, I can't think of, one of those spells, what they would be.
Even if you can't think off the top of your head an actual Harry Potter spell, can you imagine a possible spell that a student of your age could cast?
I think the first thing he would think of is like, okay, I've got to keep them still. So he would cast like a freeze spell or an ice spell to try to hold them in place.
Okay. So Robert's just about to pull them up so that they stay in place, they don't become uprooted. And Robert, he's a little surprised. He's also a little disappointed. Says, "Okay, so you do know how to use that thing."
And you're gonna be frozen next if you don't get out of here.
And Robert, he pouts a little bit and kind of kicks another plant over. Says, "Okay, fine, I'm going." And he's like walking in the air, walking off there. And he kind of disappears through the wall. But right before split second later, he pops up right next to you and says, "But not before I give you a hug." And he grabs you, lifts you up into the air.
So at this point, I think they probably have maybe that sort of playful friendship or relationship. So I think Albion would kind of like smirk a little bit like, "Okay, you got me." Still a little bit upset since he does love plants. But he would kind of give Robert a little pat and say, "Just be careful next time, buddy," or something like that.
"I'm always careful."
He says, "Yeah," and he looks around at the mess that he made and maybe starts casting the Scourgify spell to kind of let things kind of come back to their place, the broken pots and the dirt and stuff like that.
With that, Robert waves goodbye, heads out. Teacher comes in, and you guys have class.
Awesome. I think Albion would also have panicked a little when he froze the mandrakes, because then he'd be like, "Oh crap, I hope I didn't like stop them from growing or ruin them now." So he'd probably then, as soon as Robert leaves, rush over to the mandrakes and like thaw them out and just kind of tend to them and check on them, hoping that the teacher didn't get angry. But I would hope that he'd have a good relationship with the herbology teacher, being that it is a subject he excels at.
Okay.
Do you know why I'm shaking my head right now?
Me?
Yeah, do you know why I'm shaking my head right now?
No.
So after watching this scene, right now, what I'm thinking right now is, I am totally shipping Robert and Al right now.
Oh, goodness.
I'm totally shipping those two right now.
New NPC for you.
New NPC for me.
Wait till Alexander gets a hold of that information.
Dad, I'm sorry. Somebody. They're not exactly alive.
So, viewers, Albion Mermont here. Hopefully you want to see me in this campaign because I'm here to show you guys that it doesn't matter what society, what your parents, what your friends, what anyone thinks you should be. No matter how hard it is, you really just gotta focus on you. And hopefully in watching my story, you'll see the struggle with that and that it's not always easy. And that sometimes when the pressure's on, it can get tough, but you've got to stick true to you. And hopefully from watching me in this story, you'll get to see that will have some happy endings and it will have some very big ups and downs along the road. But that's what makes life awesome, is that we can go through some of those peaks and some of those valleys, make friends along the way. So if you want to see me in that growing story and learn from it, hopefully, then please choose Albion Mermont to be in the Wizarding World campaign.